Welcome to lecture number 32 of the course Linguistics 2 English 504. This is the last lecture of this course in which we'll be reviewing lectures 22 to 28. Now let's first of all look at what we did in lecture number 22. We started with the role of linguistics in literary interpretations, how linguistics is used to interpret literary writings. Role of linguistics in literary interpretation. What role does linguistics play, or what role does the study of linguistics play in literary interpretation, in interpreting the literary text, in analyzing literary texts? Now remember, we said that some major premises of linguistics which play their roles in the study of style are, what are they? The nature and importance of the addressor-addressee relationship. First of all, we look at the relationship between the addressor and the addressee, the interrelationships between linguistic and non-linguistic contexts. Then we see what relationships do the linguistic and the non-linguistic context they have with each other, the uniqueness of the phenomena language, what uniqueness does language enjoy. Literary language, remember, is not a yardstick to measure all the other functions of language. We don't see the functions of language just on the scale of literary language, because language can be analyzed in different forms, language can be analyzed on different bases. So literary language is not the only yardstick, because language is a very complex phenomena and you have so many other things to evaluate language, or to see the structure of language, or to see the role of language. Then we talked a little about the types of stylistics. Phonostylistics will deal with more or less regular recurrences of specific phonological characteristics. Now, what does phonology deal with? Deals with the phonetics, deals with the sound. And here in phonostylistics, we deal with more or less regular recurrences of specific phonological characteristics and such features as verse, length, measured syllabic length, rhyme, use of some sequence of phonemes in a given distribution, normally at the end of each verse in a sequence of verses, or assonance. Assonance means each verse ending in the same consonant or vowel phoneme, though not same consonants. So these are different linguistic devices which we look at in phonostylistics. When we look at the phonemes, when we look at the assonance, when we look at the rhyming scheme, we are basically looking at the dealing with the phonostylistics. How we analyze the role of language, how we look at the role of language in analyzing literary text. So when we see the lines of a novel or a lines of play or the poetic lines, when we are looking at the sound pattern, when we are looking at the phonemes, when we are looking at the verses, when we are looking at the musical element, when we are looking at the balance, when we are looking at the rhyming scheme, we are basically dealing with phonostylistics. We are using the rules of phonostylistics in analyzing these lines, or in analyzing these poetic lines, lines from the novels, lines from plays. We are basically using the rules of phonostylistics. Writing has its own means of indicating some of the pattern contrasts perceived clearly in the spoken language. Now, writing has its own means of indicating some of the pattern contrasts. Writing shows some of the contrasts which are very pattern, and they are very clearly perceived in spoken language. Writing, whatever contrast writing shows, whatever patterns writing shows, that can be easily perceived in spoken language. Written language's use of the alphabet, or of combinations of some of its letters to represent some of the sounds of the language use, its use of punctuation, italicization, capitalization, and so on. All these are different techniques which we use in writing. Written language use of alphabet. We use alphabets, we use punctuation, we use italics, we use capitalization. All these are basically techniques in order to focus certain parts of the writing. Now, these are basically the features of the writing, and they are clearly perceived when we read the lines, and when we convert it to a spoken English pattern, we can easily perceive, or we can easily understand what the writer means, or where the writer means to put a pause, where the writer means to stress on a certain point. So all these are perceived easily in language, in the spoken language. Moreover, to deal with features such as stress and intonation, again these are related with the spoken language or the spoken form of language. So these, whenever you want to put intonation or stress on something, the writing, the pattern of writing would indicate that yes, while reading a certain thing, while reading a certain line, here you have to put stress and here you have to put intonation. Because when we perceive it, when we just imagine that the same lines we are speaking, then of course we have to change the tone, we have to maybe speak something louder and maybe speak something in lower voice. So this is how the writing techniques are also visible, or are also perceived in the spoken language. In other words, phonology and graphology not only connect substance to form, they are themselves aspects of form, patterns, which on occasions directly make substance meaningful in a situation. So, phonology, graphology, they not only connect the substance to the form. Form is the finished thing, substance is the structure, the raw material. So they don't only connect the raw material with the finished product, but they are themselves the aspect of forms. Phonology are the aspects of form and patterns which on occasions directly made substance meaningful in a situation. They, in fact, they are a part of the substance, they are part of the form, and they make a substance meaningful. They make the lines meaningful when you have phonology introduced into the language, or when you are speaking a language, when you are reading something and you take care of the rules of phonology, rules of the speech, rules of the intonation and rules of the punctuation, you are basically making a substance meaningful. So they not only connect, their role is not just to connect, but they are themselves a part of that. They are themselves a part of the form. They do give a meaning to a part. And if you don't take care of the phonology, or you don't take care of the phonemes, or you don't take care of the pronunciation, you don't take care of the sounds or pauses, your substance becomes confusing. Whatever you are speaking, it becomes a bit confusing if you don't put pauses in between, and if you don't stress the words at right points. Grammar has dominated the description of form, and the major dominant part here is of grammar. The arrangement, that is really very important. When you're speaking something or writing something, definitely you have to take care of the arrangement, you have to take care of the forms as well. Stylistics of word, or lexical stylistics, will explore the expressive resources available in the vocabulary of a language. Now, the expressive resources, the sources which are used to express your feelings, express your thoughts, the expressive resources, and they are related with the words. The words, it's the words which play a very dominant role in the expression. If you are using the right words at the right point, that is where you are taking care of the expressions, and they are called the expressive resources, and they are present in the vocabulary of language. Stylistics of word, or lexical stylistics, will explore the expressive resources available in the vocabulary of a language. Whatever words you can pick up to express, whatever words are suitable to express your feelings, express your thoughts, express your viewpoint, you pick up those words. So that is the stylistics of words. When you look at the words, you look at how the words have been used, or which words have been used to express which feeling or express which viewpoint. So that is the expression of resources, the expressive resources, the resources which are powerful, which are expressive. They are present in vocabulary, and you pick up the right resources. It will explore the stylistic implications of such phenomena as word formation, synonymy, ambiguity, or the contrast between vague and precise, abstract and concrete, rare and common terms, foreign words. Now, the lexical stylistics, or the stylistics of words, that is the area or the study that will look at the following features like the word formation, how the words are formed by linking the sounds, synonymy, ambiguity, synonymy, the identical words, the words which with the same similar meanings, how you choose the right word with the right shade of meaning, ambiguity, when there is a confusion, when you are using the when you are want to show ambiguity, you have other words, or when there are words they show ambiguity. Then you have the contrast between vague and precise, when you want to show the contrast between the vague words and the precise words. What is vague and what is precise? Again, the words play their role. Abstract and concrete, when there are abstract ideas, how to express the abstract ideas and how to use the words, the relevant words which would show the abstract idea, and the concrete words and the concrete ideas, the words which show the concreteness. And there is concreteness is when you are just giving an idea in a very solid form and there is no approximation in that. Rare and common terms, some of the terms are very rare, used rare, and some of the common terms. So these are different kinds of words which are giving different expressions, and you choose the right words for the right expression. Foreign words, again, you also have some foreign words. In English has borrowed a lot of foreign words, and how to use those foreign words, how they will make impact, and which would be the relevant foreign words, and how powerful it would be when you are using it in a speech or writing. Stylistics of sentences or syntactic stylistics. Then we moved on to the stylistics of sentences. What is the role of stylistics in sentences? Syntactic stylistics will express the expressive values of syntax at three superimposed planes: components of sentence, individual grammatical forms, passages from one word class to another, sentence structure, word order, negation, etc., and the higher units into which single sentences combine, like direct, indirect, and free or indirect speech. So you have different kinds of sentences here, different kinds of expressions, and different kinds of sentences to indicate different expressions. Like, it will express the expressive values of syntax at three superimposed planes. There are three different planes at which the expressions are given by the sentences that will be given. Like components of sentence, individual grammatical forms. The first thing when you analyze the sentences, the first thing is you look at the grammatical forms, the components of a sentence, that is the grammatical forms. Then passages from one class, one word class to another, passages from one word class to another word class, how the words were borrowed and how the words have been used together. And then sentence structure, word order, negation, how you show the positive sentences, affirmative sentences, and how you show the negative sentences, or what sentences you use to show the affirmative feelings or to show the negative feelings. And the higher units into which single sentences combine, the higher units where you have the direct speech, the indirect speech, and free or free indirect speech. So these are different kinds of expressions and kinds of sentences that are used, and how different kinds of sentences they are used to give for different kinds of functions or to give different kinds of expressions. So this is how you analyze the sentences. You look at a sentence from different angles, and you evaluate a sentence on the basis of phonology, on the basis of the role of the words that is visible in the sentence, and on the basis of their length, on the basis of the function the sentences are playing. 8 kinds of temperaments that we came across could be expressed using words, like the weak, delicate, balanced, positive, strong, hybrid, subtle, and defective. Now all these are kinds of temperament, and that can be evident from the sentences, from the language. Now a person in delicate, person in weak temperament, person in balanced temperament, a positive temperament, strong temperament, hybrid, subtle, and defective, all these temperaments can be seen in language, are visible in language. You can really assess that what mood a person is in from the language he or she spoke. And when you see those sentences, you analyze those sentences, you can go at the background and you can know what temperament is expressed through this sentence. We can study an author's mind or inner ideas with the help of psychostylistics. Another branch that we took was psychostylistics. Of course, we talked about psycholinguistics a lot, and the study which is related with the process of brain, and here psychostylistics. So we can go to the author's mind or inner ideas from the language. The language shows what ideas were there in the mind of the speaker or mind of the writer. Socio-stylistics, again related with society, has a role to play. It studies a literary text from the point of view of varieties of language. You have so many varieties of language in society, the pidgin, the Creole, and you have dialects. So from these pidgin, Creole, dialects, that is the social aspect. So how that a certain piece, a literary piece, a certain a sentence, how the sentence has been affected by the society, by the different dialects being spoken in society, or by the registers, or by pidgin, by Creole. So all these, they have an impact on that style. So what is the role of all these factors, all these elements on the style of the writer? So socio-stylistics, basically it studies the literary text from the point of view of the variety of language. So a literary text is not an easy thing to study. You look at it from different angles. You also look at it from the psycho-stylistics, that what was the idea in the author's mind when a certain sentence was written or spoken, and what was there any impact of the society, impact of any dialect or pidgin or Creole on the sentence, impact coming from outside. So here, when we are looking at socio and psycho and socio-stylistics, we are basically analyzing the style of language from inner and outer aspects. Inner, inside the mind of the writer or speaker, and outside, the role of the society, the impact coming from the society. So what does the student of style have to see? The student of style is to see language in literature in relation to other functions of language, and has to keep the contextual meaning in mind as well. So not only language, not only structure, but also meaning. In what context a certain sentence was written, and in what context a certain sentence was spoken. So all these things, they would constitute an analysis. A student of style, what would a student of style look at? Would have to look at language in literature in relation to other functions of language. Language also has so many other functions to play, not just the embellishment, the decoration, but it has so many other functions to play to express different feelings, and to use for the speech acts, different speech acts. So from all the other functions, as well as to see the meaning from pragmatics point of view, it will also look at the meaning or semantic point of view also. It will have to look at the meaning of sentence as well. So from different angles, the sentence would be analyzed. By code switching and dialect switching as well, writers create literary effects. Some of the effects which the writers create in their writing through code switching, through the mixing of two languages, like T.S. Eliot's use of Sanskrit in Wasteland we talked about, and the dialect switching, and by changing from one dialect to another dialect, again, what is the writer doing? What other he is or she is creating a style or creating impact in his writing, or maybe focusing some area of the writing. So here these are some of the more techniques, the code switching and the dialect switching, you can add up to the earlier techniques we studied. So stylistic studies the psychic, social, linguistic, literary, ideological circumstances of a literary text. Look how comprehensive this sentence is. It studies the psychic, related with psychology, social, related with sociology, linguistic, related with language, literary, related with literature, the thoughts, the tender thoughts, the delicate thoughts present in the mind of a writer, ideological circumstances, what were the circumstances in which the sentence was spoken, of a literary text. So when you analyze a text, when you analyze a discourse, you look at all these things. You look at the viewpoint of the author, you look at the social impact, you look at the meaning, you look at the structure, you look at its impact, overall impact, you look at the deep meaning, the surface meaning and the deep meaning. From all aspects you attack that text. It's called a text attack skill as well. So you attack that text and you find out and you give us the analysis of that discourse or text. We finish this part by saying linguistics leads to the development and critical maintenance of a sensitive attitude to language. It leads to the development and critical maintenance. You're basically developing language, you are critically maintaining language, a sensitive attitude to language. You are taking care of a sensitive attitude to language, and you are analyzing language from different aspects, and that is the development and the maintenance of a language. You are trying to maintain the structure of language, you're trying to maintain the impact of language, you're trying to maintain the sensitive attitude to language by looking at the different texts, by using the techniques, by using the roles of stylistics in analyzing the literary texts. The problems of stylistic reconstruction involves all aspects of language like sound, vocabulary, morphology, syntax and semantics. So all these are a part of the stylistics, a part of the study of the use of language in analyzing literary texts. Then we talked about the discourse analysis. Discourse, longer texts and how you analyze them. Discourse refers to any utterance which is meaningful, and these texts can be written texts, oral texts, mixed written and oral texts like internet chatting. Discourse does not depend on the size of a text. Even the letter P and the word ladies can both be analyzed as discourse. So you have the basic idea behind discourse analysis, that it can take even a letter, and it can analyze a letter, how the letter was written, why the letter was written, what was the idea behind writing such a letter, and what role is this letter playing in the whole speech or whole piece of writing. Discourse refers to any utterance which is meaningful. It has to be meaningful, and these texts can be written texts, they can be oral texts, they can be mixed written and oral like internet chatting, they can be and discourse, it doesn't depend on the size of the text. Discourse analysis doesn't depend on the size of text. It's not necessary that you take very long text and only then you can apply the techniques of discourse analysis. You can analyze even a sentence, because every single sentence has a style. Every word has a style. Why that word was used, and why there was a repetition of that word, and how that word was used to create balance and harmony and music. For example, in the poetic lines. So what was the role of that word? So it's not only that you take the long text. You can analyze even letters and words. So they are the techniques of discourse analysis. They are applicable to every part of language, because in fact every part or every level, every component, whether it's a word, whether it's a sound, whether it's a sentence or even a novel, has style. Every single sentence has a style. Every single word used by the writers carries some style. A set of terms, metaphors, allusions, ways of talking, references and so on, which constitute an object. What are basically the discourses? Discourses can be a set of terms, metaphors, allusions, ways of talking, how people converse with each other, references and so on, which constitute an object. Another definition, a to and fro of exchanges in talk or text that performs social actions. So why do you talk? Why do you have to communicate? Just to survive, to perform your social acts, to survive in the society. So any exchanges and talks, exchange of information, exchange of conversation can be called a text, or any dialogue can be called a text. Any meeting can be called a text, because people are exchanging their views with one another, and when they constitute a full lot of writing or speech, and it can be analyzed using the techniques of discourse analysis. Then we talked about the approaches to discourses. Deborah Schifrin, Approaches to Discourses in 1994, singles out 6 major approaches to discourse. The speech act approach, the first one, where you perform the speech acts, the direct speech acts, the indirect speech acts, performatives. Then the interactional social linguistics, the ethnography of communication, pragmatic approach, conversation analysis, and variationist approach. Now, different approaches, how language is analyzed from these different approaches, and how we see how the language varies, and how the writers, they use language in different forms to create impact in their writings, and it can be studied in using these 6 approaches that were given by Deborah Schifrin. Now, discourse analysis is not a discipline which exists on its own. It's influenced by other disciplines and influences them as well. It's a two-way process. So you cannot say that discourse is a single discipline, or discourse analysis is a single discipline. It does have an impact on the other branches, and other branches or other disciplines, they do have an impact on discourse analysis, because when you are analyzing a discourse, you look at so many other things. You look at the morphology, you look at syntax, you look at phonology. So it's not an independent entity, it doesn't enjoy the independent existence, but it is under the influence of other branches as well. It is influenced by other disciplines and influences them as well. It's a two-way process, it's not a one-way process. For this reason, discourse analysis examines spoken and written text from all sorts of different areas. For example, medical, legal, advertising, and from all sorts of perspectives like race, gender, and power. So we analyze the discourses in different areas. We analyze the discourse, all sorts of discourses, like medical discourse, like legal discourse, or advertising, because we get writings from all these professions. We get speeches from all these professions, like medical profession, legal and advertising professions, and writings and books. So we can analyze them looking at those registers, looking at the type of language that is being spoken in or written in those professions. And then secondly, we can even have language or writings or speeches from all the different races and gender and power. Political influences are also there on the kind of writings, or the socio-economic conditions of a society may also have impact on the writings. So here it's basically discourse and analysis. When you're analyzing discourses, you do look at all these things. You look at the professions from where these discourses come. You look at the social impact on these discourses. You also look at the psychology of the writer or the speaker on these discourses. So you look at everything, you look at everything, every single impact that could be there on that impact, on that discourse. Discourse analysis has a number of practical applications, like for example in analyzing communication problems in medicine, psychotherapy, education, in analyzing written style. So when you are analyzing the discourses, you do have this very study helps you to look at other professions as well. For example, it has a lot of practical applications as well. For example, in analyzing communication problems in medicine. Now in medicine, when doctors are treating patients, they look at the kind of speech those patients are producing. They look at the kind of conversation they have with their patients, and from that they can analyze that conversation and find out the actual problems with the speakers. So with the patients who have certain problems, definitely every patient would go and talk in a certain way with the doctor, so that conversation or that very speech would give an idea to the doctor. Especially here nowadays, we see the doctors are even they have a knowledge of psychology as well. So most of the doctors are almost become psychologists with experience. They get to the psyche of the patients. So it's discourse analysis. When they analyze what kind of speech is coming from the patient, from that speech the doctors, they analyze and they see what is the problem with the speaker, or what is the problem with the patient. Likewise, in psychotherapy, when the psychologist or psychiatrist, they look at the conversation they have with their patient, or they look at the speech that is coming from their patients, and from that they would really try to find out what the problem is with the patient. Education, again, when you are analyzing discourses, you see what kind of writing is coming from the students and what is their problem, what is the actual what are the weak areas, and this can help them in fact design courses for the students. And it's like need-based analysis. They look at the needs of students, and they can find out that that need just from the discourses, just from the kind of writings the students are giving, or just from the kind of presentations, or just from the kinds of answers that the teachers get from the students. So these are discourses. So discourse analysis helps, has lent a very useful help in various fields. Like we've just discussed medicine, psychotherapy, education, in analyzing written style. So we can also find out the style of the writers from discourse analysis. Now finally, we look at the summary of approaches to discourse, approaches to studying discourse, focus of research, and the research question. Structural conversational analysis, the focus is on sequence of talk, and the research question that could be sorted out was who says what at what moment. Then variationist, structural categories within text, what that form, why that form, why that structure. Form means structure here. Speech acts, communicative acts, how to do things with words, what role the words have, how to use the words for certain functions. Ethnography of communication, the focus of research will be communication as a cultural behavior. What is the impact of culture on language, and how the language is reformed, how the language it changes under the influence of culture, and how does discourse reflect culture, and how can you reach to the culture through language, how can language give us a picture of the culture, in fact, simply speaking. Interactional sociolinguistics, the focus of research is social and linguistic meanings created during communication, and the research question is what are they doing? Interactional, what role are they playing? What needs are they fulfilling from each other? What are basically they are what desires they have, and how are they fulfilling their desires, how are they taking help, asking for help, and how are they giving help to each other. Pragmatics, meaning in interaction, what does the speaker mean, what is the speaker's viewpoint, why the speaker is speaking a certain, why is the speaker giving a certain sentence, or why is the speaker speaking in such a way. So pragmatics means basically the meaning in interaction. Why are they interacting? What meaning do they have at the background, and what is the meaning of, do they have any specific meaning, or do they have any specific desire to fulfill, and that is why they are communicating. So that is the pragmatics, what is basically the meaning of the sentences or meaning of the language they are speaking. How do you analyze discourse? Some of the final questions. Various ways, depends on what sort of discourse you are interested in. How do you analyze? You analyze looking at the type of discourse. Is it a conversation? Is it a speech? Is it a writing? Is it a novel? Is it a play? Is it a short story? All these are basically the various types of discourses, so it depends on the discourse. You apply the rules which are applicable to that discourse. Analyzing a novel would be different. Analyzing a poetic line would be different. Analyzing a play would be different, because you have different rules to apply. You look at the different roles of language and the different techniques that are applied to write these texts. And if it's a conversation, then what context affected that conversation, or what is the context behind, or why the speaker spoke certain words or certain sentences. No, was there any social impact, or was he under certain mental condition? So all these things, basically they are applied in order to study the discourses. So how do you analyze a discourse? Basically depends on the type of discourse. Constituting an object, it could start with constituting an object, and it could go to realizing a social action. So you can analyze even an object, a small word, and you can go on to analyze larger texts or social actions, how the speech acts are performed using language. That is where you are fulfilling your social desires. Why you might do discourse analysis? Some more uses, some more needs. You get close to the data, you get an idea about the data, and what is that data? The video record, it could be video recordings are live as it is lived. You uncover the subtle organization of language, the prime medium of our social lives and selves. You plug into the social practices that at the grandest constitute reality and our place in it. So here you are also looking at social practices. Why are you doing discourse analysis? For all these, you get close to the data, you get close to the speech, you get close to the human people who are producing these discourses, you get close to the society in which certain writings are coming or certain speeches are coming. So from discourse analysis, you get to know the context, you get to know the speakers, you get to know the society from which such discourses are coming. It might be connected to your life even, like job, family, friends. It might be related with your family. Some conversations related with the family, some conversations related to your job, the official correspondence, the official conversation or communication in the offices, or friends on the telephone. You're chatting with friends on the internet, or you are calling your friends on mobile or phone. So here you're again looking at the informal types of discourses. So that is how you analyze the discourses, and that is why you analyze discourses. You remember the speeches, you focus on the words spoken, and sometimes you make your decisions based on the kinds of speeches, you make your decisions on the kinds of conversations you have with your family and friends. It can go on your CV as well. Now, when you are analyzing discourses, you can add it to your CV as your achievements. So here it's like it's not a futile effort. Analyzing discourses is very beneficial, is very useful, and sometimes finally you are basically interested in discourses just for the pleasure of enjoying a text, or just for the pleasure of enjoying in writing. You analyze it, you analyze that discourse, and just to know why certain discourses were produced, how certain discourses were written, or what is the style of the authors, how do the authors use different techniques to focus on certain ideas or viewpoint, or to highlight some of the parts of the discourses. If you get interested in the subject, you might want to take it further for specialization even. You're interested in novel, you're interested in poetry, you're interested in any special technique of a writer, you can even carry it for your higher study. You can specialize on that. You can do thesis on very small minor things. You can do thesis on even a technique used by a certain writer, or you can do thesis on a certain area of a novel or play. So all these are basically the needs of doing discourse analysis, the benefits, the significance of doing discourse analysis. Then we looked at the general differences between spoken and written discourses, because when we were talking about the discourse analysis, we came across two different terms, spoken discourses and the written discourses, and we said that we analyze a discourse depending on the type of discourse it is. And then we must know the difference, because if we are analyzing any written piece and also and on the other hand we are analyzing a conversation, and a conversation we are basically using two different sets of rules, and we are analyzing depending on the type of conversation or on the type of writing it is. So the first one that we talked about was grammatical intricacies. We said the spoken spoken discourse may not be very perfect in grammar, because in our everyday life we sometimes speak sentences which are not always organized, because we just need to fulfill our purpose, we just need to fulfill our desire, and we just need to convey something, and we get the response just because it was understood immediately and it was heard and immediately understood. But in written you have to be very precise, you have to communicate it very clearly. So in written written discourse there has to be a proper grammar. The thing has to be organized, grammatically correct. So here that is the main difference, the first difference that we discussed, that the grammatical intricacy is important. In spoken doesn't have really, may not always have the correct, may not always have the exactly organized speech, but the written has to have a very perfect, organized, clear organization as far as grammar is concerned. Lexical density. Now again, the writing has more lexical density, the words are tightly packed. Whereas in spoken you have scattered words and your sentences may be scattered. But in written you can't afford to have scattered sentences, your thoughts are very compact, your sentences are very compact. So lexical density means that the words are tightly organized, the words have a clear relationship, they show us a clear relationship with each other. Nominalization, there is more basically nominalization in written. You may have more nominalization as compared to the spoken. Of course, nominalization is not a very good element, or is not a very good feature of writing, because nominalization of course makes your sentences longer and there is the conciseness is affected. But yes, in spoken English or in spoken language, any language you speak, in spoken discourses you have very little nominalization. People don't say a consideration will be given to your application in spoken language. They would say your application will be considered, or the director will consider your application. But when it is written, of course, somewhere you might have to go to passive structure, you might have to go for a depersonalized structure, where you want to avoid the action doer, or people are not interested in action doer. So there again you may have to make a speech, may have to write a bit longer line, and then there is a chance that there would be nominalization. So writing has nominalization, whereas spoken doesn't have nominalization. Explicitness, it's clarity is there. Sometimes written is explicit, and in spoken you have you don't have this, you have this quality of that it's explicit, it's clear. Spoken is much more clear than the written sometimes. But again, there was a rebuttal that writing also is explicit at some point, and both these they enjoy this feature, they enjoy the feature of explicitness. So it's not necessary that always one speech, one kind of writing is explicit and the other isn't. Contextualization. This means that the writing is not always contextualized, spoken is always contextualized, because whenever you speak you relate it with what was said earlier, you always relate it with the context, because you can't, if you talk without context, then it won't be clear, and it won't be, you would sound really unclear, and people or the listener won't really understand what you want to say. Whereas written, they say, can be out of context. But here there was again a rebuttal, that you remember that friends talking to each other, sometimes they do have old references, and it is contextualized, because even although they are not giving the old references, but still there is a reference, there is a link with something that happened in the past. So even written is contextualized sometimes, and spoken and written, there again you have writing, the area of contextual context linked with the context. So both these writings, both the kinds of discourses, they are related with context. you can't say that always you speak out of context and you don't give reference to the old speeches or old incidents. So both these were discussed under the heading of contextualization. Spontaneity. Spoken is more spontaneous. You immediately utter sentence, you immediately utter speech. It's more spontaneous than the written. Some people are more blunt, and people, they will immediately understand the thing and utter sentence. So spoken is more spontaneous than written. Repetition, hesitations and redundancy. These are features of spoken again. The repetition, there is sometimes repetition in spoken. There are hesitations, people hesitate to speak. And redundancy, sometimes people repeat the phrases which are not to be used, they use them again. So these are the features of spoken. Now here we discussed in this class, in this lecture, we discussed some of the general differences between spoken and written discourses, and how looking at these differences, how the written and spoken discourses are to be analyzed. There are two main forms of conversation, structure of conversation. Then we looked at transactional, spoken language used to obtain goods or services, also referred to as the service encounters. Then in conversation you have a type of conversation which you use to obtain goods or services, which is the business language, or the language which you use for trade purposes, for the deals. Interactional, spoken language used to allow people to interact with each other, which features a phatic use of language whose purpose is to establish an atmosphere and allow people to socialize. So there is another one, interactional, where people interact with each other to fulfill their desires, to fulfill their aims. Spoken language used to allow people to interact with each other, which features a phatic use of language, whose purpose, what is the purpose, is to establish an atmosphere and allow people to socialize. So socializing purpose, broadly speaking, socializing purpose. Interaction just for socializing, just to know people, just to let people know you, just to have deals, maybe just to enjoy, or just to have to introduce each other, just to develop a social network. So this is another way of conversation, that is the interactional. One is transactional, which is related specifically to trade or business. The other one is interactional, where you are interacting with each other just for socializing. Turn-taking was a very important phenomenon which we studied in conversation analysis. Turn-taking, where you take turns, you give turn to the other person to speak. Turn-ending, where you indicate that you have to end your speech, that you have to finish, and where you are giving chance to the listener to start talking. Adjacency pairs, different types of adjacency pairs, like the request, like offering, like question answer, like offer and acceptance and refusal, like you are inviting somebody and somebody accepts or refuses. So these are adjacency pairs. Tag questions, again, to reconfirm what you said, to reconfirm what statement you gave. Like we had so many examples in tag questions, like if the statement is positive, the tag is negative, and if the statement is negative, the tag is positive. Ahmed has come here, hasn't he? Ahmed is not well today, is he? So not well, is he? The negative statement followed by a positive tag, and Ahmed has just come. Positive statement followed by a negative tag, hasn't he? So these were the examples of the tag questions. Then the preferred and dispreferred responses. Sometimes the preferred response is, has Ahmed got A grade? Yes, he has. And then sometimes you have some other way to ask question, like you say, do you know Ahmed got A grade? Now here the preferred response would be, yes, he got, or no, he didn't. But the dispreferred response would be, yes, I know, which would sound very inappropriate, which would sound not suitable. So here we had so many other examples to show what are preferred responses and what are dispreferred responses. Then face saving. Sometimes you pass statements in your offices and in your everyday life, even just to save face of somebody. You use indirect way to talk, and you use indirect sentences just to save the image of somebody. Sometimes you have to save the image of somebody, and sometimes when you pass on a direct comment, you're basically threatening. They are called the face threatening acts. So you have face saving comments. There you are basically trying to preserve the image, trying to save the image of somebody, and face threatening acts where you are trying to spoil the image, trying to threaten the face, means trying to threaten the image. You are basically putting somebody's image at danger. So here we talked about the different phenomena that are used in conversation: the turn taking, turn ending, then the adjacency pairs, tag questions, preferred, dispreferred responses, face saving, face threatening acts. And we also discussed there are rules of turn taking, the different ways turn taking is done. Like sometimes you give the speaker gives a chance to the listener, and sometimes the listener takes a chance of turn, and sometimes the speaker doesn't give a chance and the listener doesn't take a chance. Then the speaker may continue speaking. You remember, I hope, that there are different instances or different ways of taking turns. The rules of conversation were first formulated by Paul Grice as a cooperative principle. This states that we interpret the language on assumption that the speaker is obeying the four maxims known as Grice's maxim, like quality being true, quantity being brief, relation being relevant, manner being clear. So rules of conversation. Four things that a person has to remember, four things that the speakers have to remember. They should be true, they should be brief, should be relevant, and should be clear. So all these are the good qualities of conversation, the good qualities of spoken skills, the good qualities of a good speaker or a person who is to converse or who is conversing with somebody. Here, the four qualities has to obey the four rules. That is how he or she can create a fluency in speaking. Conversation is a flexible text negotiated between various participants in a conversation. With the knowledge of Grice's maxim, the speakers and listeners support and evaluate each other using known building blocks, adjacency pairs, and terms. Non-fluency features are voiced gap fillers and openers and closures, like you open a speech and then you give an indication to close a speech. So conversation is basically a flexible text negotiated between various participants in conversation, but they have to obey the rules, they have to know the rules, like when are they going to give chance to the other to speak, turn taking, the rules of turn taking. Then they are basically evaluating each other, they are supporting each other, evaluating each other, because they need to create a fluency in their speech. They need to reach the end point of conversation, and they need to reach a mutually agreed end of the conversation, because if there is interruption or overlapping, again the conversation may not reach the desired end. Then you have the non-fluency features like voice gap fillers, and you sometimes have fillers to fill in the pauses between speech. You have fillers like or you know, maybe, well. Now these words we discussed, we use these words to put the pauses or put the fillers in the conversation. Openers and closures means when you are to open a speech and when you have to close, you do give signals for opening and you do give signals for closing. Discourse markers to signpost a structure. You have some discourse markers to signpost a structure, means you give some discourse marker, you give indication where you have to finish. This signposting causes the participants to be aware of the conversation's structure, enabling the smooth progression from one topic to topic and from speaker to speaker. So you need to a lot of fluency in conversation, and a discussion cannot reach the final point unless it is really fluent, unless people are cooperative with each other, unless people are giving chance to each other to speak. So at the same time, conversation also observes the politeness principle, which in turn involves issues of face saving, being polite. You have to be polite. You have to be considerate. That is how the conversation will attain fluency. Basic notions, turn taking. We talked about turn taking, conversations analyzed in turns, one speaker and then the next. A turn consists of one or more TCU, turn construction unit. You remember the very famous term that we used again and again, TCU, the end point where the conversation is to finish. The end of a turn construction unit is a point during a turn when another speaker can intervene, when the other speaker takes a turn to speak. This point is called TTRP, turn transitional relevant point. So the end of the TCU, the point where the other speaker has to take a turn, the TTRP, turn transitional relevant point. Adjacency pairs we discussed. One of the most noticeable things about conversation is that certain classes of utterances conventionally come in pairs, like question answers, greeting, invitation acceptance, offer acceptance or refusal or declination. So all these are kinds of some of the pairs that we discussed in the adjacency pairs. Then we talked about repairs. Sometimes you utter a wrong sentence. Sometimes you utter a sentence which may be inappropriate according to the context. So then you make a repair. And the repair system embodies a distinction between the initiation of repair, marking something as a source of trouble. First of all, you mark that sentence. You initiate the repair. You say, well, this is something wrong, and you basically give signal that you have uttered something wrong. And then the actual repair itself. The second stage is to repair itself. This is also the distinction between repair initiated by self, the speaker who produced a trouble source, and the repair initiated by the other. Consequently, there are 4 varieties of repair. Interruption, and you have different 4 varieties of repair. Repair can come in 4 different shapes. Interruptions break the symmetry of conversation model, and we talked about interruptions which are bad to the fluency of speech. And what are they? The interruptions prevents the first speaker from finishing his or her turn, at the same time gaining a turn for oneself, second speaker. Bennett says overlap is when 2 voices are going on at the same time. Another term that we discussed was overlap. Overlapping is when 2 speakers are talking at the same time and there may be some words repeated. So that is overlapping. Now these are basically the interruption. Overlapping are the negative features for the fluency of conversation, and they may cause sometimes the interruptions, they may cause even the they may have the speaker or the listener may have to make repairs. Sometimes they may utter a wrong sentence and may have to they may have to make repairs. Repairs can come from different points. It may come from the speaker, it may come from the listener. Sometimes the speaker indicates that he's made a mistake and makes a repair himself or herself. Sometimes the listener indicates and the speaker makes a repair, and sometimes the listener listens to it, indicates and repairs himself or herself. So there are different ways repairs can come. Now then we talked about the language variation, how has language changed over the period of history. Changes occur because they are natural. Why is language changing? Because human beings, cultures and societies are changing, just as the human behavior is changing. So changes are also occurring because they are natural. Language in the state of constant variation because it is transmitted from one generation to the next. When languages are conveyed, they are to the next generation, they are passed on to the next generation. The next generations take some words from the old languages and again they coin some new words and they bring some new words from their age, and that is how the languages change, and that is how you get the new varieties of language. Changes are slow but sure. Definitely changes are slow. It's difficult to notice the changes, but then they may be noticed after a long period of time that yes, the language there is a gradual change. Gradually the language has been changing, and now we have such a different language which may not be which is very different from the language which our forefathers spoke, or which was being spoken which was spoken maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. So this is the difference that has occurred, and we talked in detail about language variation, and we said that this change is not because people want to get some good purpose or some bad purpose. It's just for suitability, because people need to survive in the society, just because they need to fulfill their purposes. So it's because people want to sound different. It's because people want to sound unique. They want to survive in that very part of the world. They want to survive in that culture. They want to survive in that society. So that is why they fit in. In order to fit in those societies, they learn new words and they start using new words. So this is just for suitability. Language change can be studied along two lines, diachronic and synchronic. We were familiar with the terms diachronic and synchronic. We discussed in one of the earlier lectures, and we said that Chaucer's language different from Milton, and Milton's language different from T.S. Eliot. The modern English, T.S. Eliot, is of course easier version, and it is different from Middle English used by Milton and the Old English used by Chaucer. So and then the diachronic variations, which are related with history, which are related with the different ages, and which are related with the past of the language and the future of language. In diachronic variations, we discussed that language can change because the meaning can change sometimes, because when you are continuously using a word for a certain object, continuous, and with more technological advancement, you have more objects. So when you start using those words for that, the words, they lose meanings. So the meanings, when the meanings are changed, languages are changed. You have so many words now which were not there in the past, and there were so many words in the past which no more exist in present. It's because of the scientific invention sometimes. It's because of the technological advancements. You have more objects now. You have more physical objects around. We have more physical objects around us. So we have more new names, and we go for the new names. We don't use the old names. Extension, the extended meaning. Sometimes we had an example of journey. If you remember, in the past, journey meant maybe a day's journey, but now we use journey for even a month's journey or a year's journey. So that is the extended meaning. Euphemism, when we use different words to hide the unpleasant effect of the words. So we use the words with positive impact, the words with positive shade of meaning. Metathesis, spellings, syntax, all that are basically the diachronic variations, the variations coming from the history, the variations coming in relation to the time, in relation to the history, in relation to the changing times. Even metathesis, the language of a single person, spellings they change, syntax has changed, the organization of sentences has changed, even the spellings have changed. So all these changes are related with history. Then we talked about the synchronic variations, like language contact. When the languages come into contact, we had an example of Indian English and Pakistani English with different words coming because of the language being in contact. And you have words which are mixture of, you have such words which have entered English, and such sentences which may be a mixture of English and Indian. And even in Pakistani English, we have so many words which we have taken from Urdu or Punjabi or other regional languages, and we are using them especially in newspapers or media. We have so many such words which are not basically present in proper English, but we are using them in English, and we are taking these words from the local cultures. Dialects, you have different dialects, like dialect is specific language spoken in any specific geographical area. So dialects are related with geographical areas. You have different styles of speaking a language in different geographical areas. So they also have created so many other varieties of language and so many other varieties of, let's say, even in English, in England you have the RP, received pronunciation, being spoken by just the aristocrat. So here, even English has a lot of dialects. The Lancashire English is different from Scottish English. So all these different varieties are an indication that yes, there are synchronic changes as well, there are diachronic changes as well. Then you have registers in the language related with the professions. Different professions have different varieties of language, like the language being used in law is different, being used in business is different, being used in engineering is different. So you have different registers, and these, they all have created so many varieties of English, or so many varieties of other languages, so many even varieties of Urdu, because they are related with their professions. You have the different words or specific language for that for that very profession, and these specific languages, they have given rise to different varieties. You have varieties of dialect, like variety of language according to the user is called dialect. It's determined by speaker's social and geographical background. General American English and RP are two different dialects of English. We had a few examples like last, dance, dance, and then we had so many other examples which talked about the pronunciation. And register, the same, the language related to different professions. The same individuals use different varieties of language depending on the situation. Language according to the situation is called register. And then there were different registers like formal, informal registers, linguistic, law, literary, commerce, science, business. All these have their own special language or particular language, and these are different varieties of English or varieties of Urdu. Classification, register according to the field of discourse, according to the profession, and according to the mode of discourse. How the registers are coming, how we are using the registers, how are we using these words, whether we are taking them from media, we're taking them from the writings. They can be differentiated on the basis of the modes, the ways, the media, the medium through which we are getting these words, or the medium through which we are getting these variety. So this was basically about English 504. We took the first 28 classes, and we had different topics. We discussed the theories, we discussed the structure of language, we discussed the contribution of important people towards language, we discussed the structure, how languages are made, we discussed about the types or varieties of language, we discussed about the relationship of between psychology and language, the role of psycholinguistics. Then we also discussed the role of sociolinguistics, the role of society towards modifying language. And then after that we had a series of revision lectures. The first one we discussed about the first 7 lectures, so the next one, the next 7, and today we have concluded the revision chapter or the revision phase of this course, English 504. We hope that you must have got an insight into the kind of theories or the belief or the contributions or the kind of concepts that were related with linguistics. This was basically an introduction to some of the theories and introduction to the structure and some different branches of linguistics. So we hope that you must have grasped, and you must have really learned how linguistics or how language developed over the period of time, and what were the different techniques of analyzing discourses, or how we talked about the style of language. So this was all as far as the English 504 was concerned. We hope you will perform very well in your quizzes and assignments, and we wish you the best, and we hope to be in touch with you in future.